Sorry, I didn't see you there. I was just engrossed in Tears of the Kingdom. So, if you've been playing it as well, I hope you agree that it's amazing. I just had to draw a Zelda picture this week. I'm obsessed with the new game. So the drawing this week, it took me ages to do. It was about 5.5 hours total. So even shrunk down and sped up. It was quite a massive video, so I decided to cut it into 2 halves. This video will be the first half. It would be just the drawing from blank page to finished inks. The next video will show the colouring process. So I hope that's a decent decision. I wasn't sure whether to do one big one or 2 smaller ones. See what you think. I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been a huge fan of the Zelda games since I was a young teenager. The fact that I still love them so much now that I'm in my 30s is either testament to their enduring, evergreen appeal or a sad acknowledgement of my inability to grow up. But I'm choosing to believe the first one. Now, if you're as old as me, you'll probably remember how much The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64 revolutionised video games back in 1998. Not many games have managed to impress me half as much since. Well, that was until Breath of the Wild came out on the Wii U and Switch a massive 19 years later in 2017. Now, I didn't think anything was likely to top Breath of the Wild for another 19 years, if I'm honest. But incredibly, the first few days I spent with Tears of the Kingdom have managed to amaze me all over again, only a handful of years later. Which one's your favourite Zelda game? I think Tears might be mine so far, but let me know what yours is in the comments. If you're playing it too, I hope you're having a great time with the game so far, and if you're not, I hope this drawing can transport you to the islands above Hyrule for a short time. With this sketch, I wanted to capture the feeling that struck me most during the opening few hours. The feeling of freedom, a sense of playful joy, the excitement of seeing distant places to explore, and the feeling of being high up in a beautiful sky surrounded by nature and magic. With that in mind, I decided that I wanted to draw series hero Link playfully balancing near the edge of a small sky island with a huge filling sky stretching out behind him. Nature is a key part of this game too, so I decided early on that I wanted a big, twisting, gnarled tree, roots gripping tightly against the weathered stone blocks of the island, almost holding it together. Roughs are quite a funny thing, so what rough means is totally different really, depending on the artist. Some people work far more loosely than this, other people can rough much more tightly. I need a certain amount of form and detail in my drawing to make sure that I'll feel confident inking over them later, but I don't want to make these roughs so tight that inking feels like tracing. As for me, that really kills my enthusiasm and will make my ink lines later a bit too static, whereas if I ink over looser lines, it really allows me to keep some fluidity and energy in them. Some areas like the moss, I didn't need to do with the texture just yet in this rough stage, but it will help remind me what my original intent was later on when I come back to it. I've left Link's outfit purposefully vague right now. To be honest, I couldn't remember what the outfit that I wanted to draw him in looked like, and I thought that if I referenced that whilst I was roughing the pose, I'd be dividing my attention between the outfit and the pose, and I'd probably end up with a worse pose as a result. So instead, I treat Link almost like one of those cut-out paper dress-up dolls, and I can draw his outfit properly on a separate layer afterwards. I sketched the distant islands pretty loosely. I don't want to define them too specifically, just enough to make them look like somewhere that you'd be curious to find your way over to and explore. So once pretty much everything is roughed in, I turn my attention back to the one area that is still quite vague, the outfit that I mentioned before. I had a reference photo of the outfit on my phone, so I drew it over Link on a new layer after making the original layer paler and less distracting. I wanted to capture the feeling of being high up and have the wind whipping around Link's clothing and hair to make the world feel alive. Now the lines here are still quite loose, but I'm making sure that they're all where I need them to be to guide the final drawing. I often find the roughs to be the toughest stage of a drawing or a comic page. It's where you make most of the important decisions. You have to figure out a composition and your character's pose, both of which can really make or break your drawing. Just because they look rough doesn't necessarily mean they were drawn quickly. In fact, when I'm drawing comics, I always find the days where I'm drawing the roughs to be the most tiring. Now, don't get me wrong, drawing roughs is fun and fulfilling too, but there's more decision making done in that process compared to the inking or colouring, and it usually leaves me feeling quite exhausted as a result. Now, with the outfit drawn, I've completed my roughs. Everything I needed to guide my final drawing, the inks, is there. So I guess that means it's inking time. Now, inking in the age of digital art might seem a confusing term if you're new to it. Put simply, when comics were drawn on paper, an artist would draw their rough layouts in pencil, and then use pencil again to tighten up the drawing to a much more finished state, which we'd call the pencils. Now, pencil drawings wouldn't be defined or dark enough to print from using older printing techniques though, so after the pencils, they, or another artist, would draw over the pencils with ink, using a variety of techniques. Most commonly, it would be painting lines with brushes or drawing the lines with a dip pen, and this stage is called inking. Now, this step is often mischaracterized as tracing, but good inking can elevate a drawing hugely. I decided to focus on the elements of scenery before inking Link. I think sometimes the character can seem like the fun part, and I wanted to be sure that I gave my full attention to the island, as I put a lot of care into it in the roughs, which I wanted carried across to the finished drawing. During inking, it's important to think about the textures of everything you're drawing. Try to make your work feel tactile, and the audience will respond to that. Imagine not just what something looks like, but what it feels like. So when you're drawing moss, imagine the sensation of stroking it or pushing a hand into a mound of it. Likewise, when you're drawing stone, imagine how it would feel to run your hand across that too. Thinking of surfaces this way helps me draw them better, I find. I'm not 100% sure why, but it's worth trying, I think. Now, you should be able to tell that these are ruins immediately. The edges of the stone are clearly pieced together from carved blocks, but the rounded off, wobbly edges of the blocks and thick moss clue you into the fact that they're heavily worn and weathered by the years. The lines on the surface of the stone may look wobbly and pretty random, but they're all helping to define two things: the surface of the blocks and which way the surface is facing. Now, see how I erased those lines into the black, shaded underside of the arch? Now, they run roughly parallel to the curve of the arch, reinforcing the shape as a solid 3D object. As I continue further up, I'm trying to mix up the types of vegetation. I draw a few plants with different leaf shapes that are clustered differently from one another. It's just a hint of variety, but it, along with the moss and mushrooms, is enough to convince you that it's a long abandoned place, overgrown and left to nature. Now, the star of this sky-sailing stone slab, however, is this big old tree, its thick roots clutching tightly to this boulder. I like drawing trees. You can have a lot of fun drawing them. Here I'm focusing on drawing the roots so that they look strong and well anchored to the island. I have the roots twisted around, looking almost like muscle groups at times, and trying to put shadows at the spots where they're not in direct contact with the rocks, where they lift away to make them look more natural. I draw texture lines as I go as well, to make sure that it has the appearance of rough bark. Also trying to make sure that the texture marks enhance the sense of roundness and dimension of the roots. Now, this part of the video would have been a great time to play a track by the Roots, like some sort of musical pun, but I prefer not to have a copyright strike against my channel. Still, hopefully the fact that I communicated this hilarious, in inverted commas, gag like this will be almost as effective as actually doing it. I drew in one of those little windmill things as a nod to the Koroks to show that they're here. I mean, they seem to be absolutely everywhere in this game, so I had to represent them somehow. I'll admit, at this point, I'm running out of things to say about inking a tree, as my dreadful joke about the roots may have inadvertently revealed. Also, the fact that I added the word inadvertently into that last sentence completely unnecessarily, just to stretch it out and kill time. Unlike this sentence, which is, of course, absolutely vital to my video. In fact, speaking of things to say, I'll be extremely grateful if you consider giving this video a like, and if you'd subscribe to this channel, it would genuinely make my day. I draw the trunk continuing up until it becomes cast in shadow from the dense canopy of leaves above, some of which are also in deep shadow. Rather than draw each leaf, I hint at them, which, fortunately for my drawing arm, perfectly suits the pared back visual style of the game. Once that's done, I hop back over to Link and start to ink him. I realised I'd missed some important detail from Link's robe, which I couldn't see in my original photo ref, so I went back and added in the cool Triforce motif to the hem. It's slightly tricky to draw that pattern curving around like that, but small challenges like that can be quite fun. As I'm drawing clothing, I try to focus on how loose cloth would react to the winds, high up in the sky. I want them rippling in waves of fabric, like your grandma's shawl on a windy family trip to the seaside. I put a few nicks into the edge of the tunic underneath too, to give it a tatty, weathered look. The trousers bunch up a bit where they meet the tops of the boots to suggest that they're quite thick, but tucked in. I then zoom out a touch and draw the braided leather strap running diagonally across Link's chest. This will press down his tunic and robe, but I still wanted them billowing out either side of it. Again, this gives a sense of presence to these bits of clothing, suggesting that they're all responding to one another, as well as to the conditions that Link is in. Similarly, these boots are made of soft lambskin, wrapped with crisscrossing straps of leather, so I wanted to see the tension from those strips pressing into the boots, so that you could sense the thickness of the material underneath. Studying how clothing reacts to the wind, or the movement of the people who are wearing it, can give you some great ideas for making your drawings feel more alive. Now, I go into this idea a bit in my Enhance Your Action series of tutorial videos, especially in the second one. If you want some good tips for drawing comics or exciting drawings, I'd recommend checking that one out. Whilst drawing the muscles, I keep my lines thin, only thickening them in areas where there is increased depth. I try to keep that effect as subtle as possible, as drawing harder outlines around all of the muscle groups can look a bit heavy-handed. Speaking of heavy hands, I try to make the new metal details on Link's arm feel like they're naturally wrapping around his arm, whilst also feeling chunky and strong. I fine-tune a few details and then make my way to the face. I'd already drawn a face I was really happy with in my roughs, so this was simply a case of redrawing that, but with a bit more nuance and subtlety to enhance the feeling of dimensionality in the forms. I really wanted his expression to feel right. Link doesn't speak, so he has a quiet, enigmatic feeling to him. I wanted to have him feeling a sense of introverted wonder at his surroundings. I also draw the hair. I want to make sure that feels like it's being blown around by the wind, but also keeping it to a simple, chunky style. This version of Link doesn't need every hair strand rendered on him, so sticking to bigger shapes that suggest the hair suits what I'm going for best, especially with a few very fine flicked lines near the tips of his hair. Now all of the foreground details are fully drawn, I turn towards the background. Because we're up in the sky, there's not too much to draw, just a few birds at different distances from us, followed by some distant sky islands. So as I'm putting on the finishing touches, we're really getting towards the end of this drawing video. If you like drawing, like Zelda, or you like both, I hope that this has been an enjoyable process to follow. It's not all though. There is a part 2 as well, which you can watch if you'd like to see me colour this drawing up. I'm really pleased with the finished result, so check that out now. Thank you ever so much for watching this, I really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. See you next time.